Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Scary Stories video. Today's story is something special, one of the creepiest, most unsettling true experiences I've ever come across. And the best part is that it was sent in by one of you. I know a lot of you love these real-life horror stories, and this one is no exception. The person who sent this in swears it's 100% true, and after reading it, I honestly don't know what to think. Before we get into it, if you love scary stories and want to hear more like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I've got some even creepier stories coming soon that you don't want to miss. Also, if you have a real scary story of your own, whether it's paranormal, a strange encounter, or just something that still keeps you up at night, send it in. You might just hear your story featured in a future video. Alright, settle in, turn off the lights, and get ready, because this one is seriously disturbing. Let's get into it. I wasn't going to post this. I swear on everything I love, I was going to keep my mouth shut and never speak about this again. But the thing is, I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. Or maybe it's not a face at all. I'm not even sure anymore. This is gonna sound insane, but I don't care. I need someone, anyone, to read this and tell me I'm not imagining all of it. It started 4 months ago in November. I just moved into this small apartment on Tuckerman Lane in Bethesda, Maryland. I know, that probably sounds fancy or something, but trust me, this building is old, the walls are paper thin, and it's the only place I could afford within commuting distance to my job. I'm a mid-level IT technician for a medical research facility. Long hours, low pay, but I like the work. Anyway, I was just thrilled to have a place of my own. It was my first time not living with a roommate or crashing at someone's place. It felt like a fresh start. I remember the first day I got the keys. The landlord, Mr. Barry, handed them to me and said, "You look like a reliable young man. Don't cause trouble, and don't mind some of the older tenants. They're a little set in their ways." He wouldn't quite meet my eyes when he said it. I shrugged, assumed he was talking about grumpy neighbors who'd file noise complaints if I sneezed too loudly or something. The apartment itself was on the 4th floor, 4B. It had a battered metal door with 3 different deadbolts. A little excessive, but I wasn't going to complain. The inside was small, a kitchen living room combo that could barely fit a sofa and a TV stand, a cramped bedroom, and a bathroom whose shower head was basically lodged into the ceiling. Old building, old layout, no big deal. But the rent was within my budget and I could get to work in about 30 minutes, so I signed the lease. Things were normal for about a week. I was busy setting up the place, hauling in furniture bit by bit, trying to make it feel like home. At night, I'd catch the usual city noises, muffled traffic, the hum of fluorescent lights in the hallway, sometimes footsteps overhead if the upstairs neighbor was pacing around. Standard stuff. But then I noticed the first weird thing. The window in my bedroom wouldn't lock properly. The latch was bent out of shape, and no matter how many times I fiddled with it, I couldn't get it to align. I tried to bend it back with some pliers. Nothing. I ended up jamming a length of wooden dowel in the track so it couldn't be slid open from the outside. It's not exactly an advanced security measure, but it did the trick. I figured it was just a glitchy old window. Didn't even think to talk to Mr. Barry about it. A few nights after I moved in, I woke up around 2 a.m. to what sounded like a faint scraping noise. I'll be honest, I'm a heavy sleeper, so for me to wake up, something had to be pretty distinct. It wasn't super loud, but it was steady, like someone dragging something across concrete. I got up and listened. It seemed to be coming from outside, maybe from the back alley behind the building. I debated checking it out, but new neighborhood, middle of the night. I opted for going back to sleep, eventually chalking it up to a stray cat or raccoon messing around. If it wasn't setting off any alarms or coming from inside the building, I didn't see the point in investigating. In hindsight, I wish I'd at least looked out the window to confirm. Hindsight's a sick joke that way. I didn't meet too many neighbors right away. Most people around here keep to themselves. I'd see someone occasionally in the hallway, usually an older man who lived in 4A. His name was Sam, I believe, and he always wore these big, baggy sweaters and smelled faintly of mothballs. He'd nod at me without smiling. Sometimes, as we passed, he'd quietly whisper something like, "Long nights, huh?" or "The walls are listening." I'd just sort of nod back and keep walking, thinking he was senile or some conspiracy buff. One time, he told me, "Keep your windows shut." That was it. Just that phrase. No context, no explanation. Then he shuffled off. I tried to introduce myself to him one morning. I knocked on his door with a piece of mail that had been mistakenly put in my box. He opened it just a crack, enough for me to see one watery blue eye. I held out the letter, said, "I think this belongs to you. I'm your neighbor, new to the building." He gripped it, didn't say thanks, and just closed the door. It rattled as though multiple locks latched shut in quick succession, like the door was equipped with more locks than I'd realized. That was that. I shrugged and went about my day. Other neighbors were equally elusive. Occasionally, I'd see a tall woman with short, dark hair stepping off the elevator. She'd give me a quick nod and vanish around the corner. Or I might see a couple wrangling a toddler into a stroller in the lobby. No one seemed too keen on idle chit-chat. Not exactly the friendliest place, but I'm not a huge social butterfly either. I figured it was an apartment building full of introverts. That was fine by me. But the strange warnings from Sam in 4A stuck in my head, especially the "keep your windows shut." That night, I stood in my bedroom with the lights off, looking at the faint reflection of myself in the dark window. The city lights glowed in the distance, and in the alley below, I could see a narrow strip of ground illuminated by a single flickering street lamp. I noticed something moving, maybe a stray cat. My eyes played tricks on me, so it was hard to be certain. The scraping sound from the other night flitted through my memory, making me uneasy. I double-checked the wooden dowel. Everything was in place. I locked my bedroom door, too, for good measure. Then I tried to sleep, but it took me a while. Things escalated about 3 weeks into living there. I work from 9 a.m. to around 7 p.m. most days, though sometimes I do on-call shifts that can last until 11 p.m. if I need to fix some server meltdown. It was one of those nights. I was coming back at around 11:30 p.m., exhausted, carrying a to-go bag of lukewarm Chinese takeout. The lobby was empty. The old security guard, Randall, was half asleep at the desk. He gave me a nod, and I waved back. Nothing out of the ordinary. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the 4th floor. The doors slid shut. The elevator made its usual groaning ascent, but at the 2nd floor, it lurched to a stop, almost as if someone outside had pressed the call button. But there was no one standing there when the doors opened. The hallway lights on the 2nd floor flickered. No figure, no footsteps, nothing. I tapped the close door button, feeling my stomach churn slightly. The elevator resumed climbing. Then it stopped again on the 3rd floor. Doors opened. Same deal. Empty hallway. By now, my heart was thumping. I said out loud, half joking, "Hello? Anyone there?" Silence. Just a faint hum of overhead lights. I pressed the button for the 4th floor again. The doors slid shut more slowly this time, like the elevator was hesitating. When the elevator finally reached the 4th floor, the lights inside flickered for a split second. It was enough to make me gasp. I'm not easily rattled, but something about it felt off, like the building itself was exhaling some stale breath. The doors opened and I stepped into the hallway, which was darker than usual. One of the overhead light fixtures was out, so a stretch of the corridor lay in shadows. At the far end, near 4A, I thought I saw movement, a shape, a silhouette maybe. But as I blinked, it was gone. The entire floor was quiet, the only sound coming from the slight squeak of my sneakers on the linoleum. I made a beeline for my apartment, fumbling with my keys. It felt like something was breathing down my neck. Once I was inside, I slid the chain latch into place, locked both deadbolts, and dropped my bag of takeout on the kitchen counter. My mind was racing. Maybe it was just some electrical glitch making the elevator stop, or maybe someone was messing with me for fun, but it didn't feel playful. It felt calculated, like I was being toyed with. I tried to shake it off. I heated my takeout, ate half of it while doom scrolling on my phone, then crawled into bed. That night, I woke around 4 a.m. This time, the scraping noise outside was accompanied by a faint tapping, like nails on glass. Heart pounding, I sat up, listening. The tapping was very soft, almost hesitant, like a knock you'd give if you didn't really want the person inside to hear. It was definitely coming from the bedroom window. I felt my mouth go dry, and I slid out of bed as quietly as I could. The curtains were drawn. Part of me was terrified to look, but I had to know. With trembling fingers, I pulled the curtain an inch aside and peered out. The fire escape outside my bedroom was empty. I could see nothing but the black metal bars and the glow from a distant streetlight. No movement, no person. The window was still shut, the dowel still in place. Yet the tapping persisted, soft, rhythmic, right on the glass, like something invisible was on the other side. My pulse pounded so hard it felt like my eardrums would burst. I stared, unblinking, as the tapping continued. Then, abruptly, it stopped. I have no explanation for this. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? There's a ghostly tapping on my window? I didn't have any sign of forced entry. I'd have come off like a paranoid lunatic. So I just stood there, half in shock, half in fury that I couldn't do anything about it. Eventually, after maybe 5 minutes of dead silence, I crawled back into bed. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, my dreams were filled with dark silhouettes tapping on glass. The following morning, I felt numb. I forced myself to shower and get ready for work. It was a weekend, but I had some overtime tasks to handle. In the elevator, I ran into the older guy from 4A, Sam. This time, he was wearing a thick winter coat, even though the building's heating was on full blast. He gave me a side glance and mumbled, "Did you hear it? Did you hear them last night?" My skin prickled. "Hear what?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He laughed, a dry, humorless bark. "You know," he said, then tapped his knuckles on the elevator wall in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. It was the same pattern I'd heard on my window. My heart started hammering. "Look, Sam," I said quietly, "I'm not sure what's going on in this building, but if you know something, you need to tell me." He just smiled with his lips pressed tight, shook his head, and stared at the floor. When the doors opened on the ground level, he shuffled away without another word. By the time I recovered from my shock and followed, he was out the front door, disappearing into the crowd. I spent that entire work shift in a fog of distraction. I kept replaying the tapping noise in my head, Sam's cryptic question. During my lunch break, I decided to do some digging. I searched online for anything connected to Tuckerman Lane, that building address, or any suspicious incidents that might have happened there in the past. I waded through pages of irrelevant rental listings, local business reviews, nothing. Then, I decided to narrow the search to mysterious noises, urban legends, or break-ins. Still, I turned up zilch. It was only when I started looking up older archives of local newspapers that I found something. A small snippet from 1996 reported, "Bizarre incident at Tuckerman Lane apartment complex remains unsolved." The piece talked about a tenant claiming someone was climbing the fire escape at night and tapping on windows. The occupant, a woman named Harriet Cole, apparently vanished a week later, leaving her apartment in disarray. No forced entry, no sign of struggle, just a missing persons case that went cold. My blood turned to ice. The article was over 20 years old, but the details matched almost exactly. Mysterious tapping on the window, vantage from the fire escape, occupant terrified. Harriet Cole was never found. I printed the article and stuffed it in my bag. That night, before heading home, I stopped by a hardware store and bought 2 new window locks and a small battery-powered motion sensor alarm meant to attach to windows or doors. I was determined not to be a victim of some weirdo prowling around. The clerk at the hardware store commented that I looked pale. I just grunted and paid for my items, my mind on autopilot. When I got back to the apartment, it was around 7:30 p.m. I installed the new locks on the bedroom window, though they didn't fit perfectly with the old frame, and I stuck the little motion sensor in a corner of the windowsill. It would beep loudly if the window moved even slightly. Just having it there made me feel a bit safer. I sat on my couch, my dinner forgotten on the kitchen counter, reading that newspaper clipping over and over, trying to glean more. Harriet Cole's name stuck in my mind. She was my age, late 20s, when she vanished. The article offered no explanation, no suspect, nothing. My thoughts drifted to the scraping noise, the tapping, Sam from 4A who seemed to know something, and all of it churned my stomach into knots. For the next week, it was quiet, so quiet it made me paranoid. No tapping, no scraping outside, no flickering elevator lights. Even Sam from 4A didn't appear in the hallway. I actually knocked on his door one evening, intending to confront him, show him the article, and see if he knew more about it. No response. It was like he vanished too. I kept going to work, returning late, and in the back of my mind, I was waiting for the next shoe to drop. One day, I decided to check with the building super about Sam. The super was an elderly woman named Gladys, who was always watering plants in the lobby. "Excuse me," I asked her softly. "The gentleman in 4A, Sam, have you seen him lately?" She frowned. 4A, you say? That's not Sam. That's Mr. Bradley, dear. He's been there for years, rarely leaves. Not sure where you got Sam from." My stomach sank. Wait, "So you're telling me the man in 4A is named Bradley?" "Yes, Mr. William Bradley. Lives alone, keeps to himself. If you saw him, count yourself lucky. He doesn't usually speak to anyone." She gave me a knowing look, almost a pitying glance, then continued watering her ferns. I was dumbfounded. Who the hell was Sam then? Had this man lied to me or given me a fake name? Or did I just assume it was Sam from how I heard other neighbors refer to him? My mind went in circles, trying to recall if I'd ever heard him introduce himself. I just remembered hearing someone say, "Hey Sam," in the hallway weeks ago, but maybe they weren't even talking to him. My confusion only deepened. Around that time, a new presence in the building started to creep me out even more. A guy I'd see lingering in the lobby late at night, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He'd be slouched in a corner near the mailboxes, seemingly doing nothing. Whenever I glanced at him, he'd shift position or angle himself away, as if he didn't want me to get a good look at him. Once, I tried to circle behind him to access my mailbox, and he backed away so abruptly he almost collided with me. He muttered something, I couldn't make out the words, and bolted out the front door, leaving the glass doors swaying in his wake. I asked the security guard, Randall, who that guy was. Randall just shook his head. "We get all sorts around here, kid. Could be a resident, a visitor, or just a homeless guy looking to warm up for a minute." I pressed him for more details, but he shrugged me off. "I can't ID every random face that comes through," he grunted. "Unless he causes trouble, I got nothing on him." That was the end of that. I continued my late work nights. Part of me dreaded coming back to the apartment, especially in the dark, but I had nowhere else to go. My rent was paid up, and the landlord wasn't going to let me break my lease without some massive penalty. So I stuck it out, double-checking my locks every night, sleeping with a small flashlight and a kitchen knife on my bedside table. Yeah, it was probably excessive, but I felt I needed some kind of defense. Then came the night I'll never forget, December 16th, if memory serves. I got home a bit earlier, maybe 9 p.m. The hallway lights on the 4th floor were flickering again, that same patch near 4A in shadows. As I approached my apartment, I thought I heard a faint whispering, like two people conversing in hushed tones. My heart hammered. I paused, listening. One voice was definitely an older man, raspy, halting. The other, softer, maybe a woman or even a child, I couldn't tell. It felt as though it was coming from behind the door to 4A, but I wasn't certain. I quickly unlocked my apartment and slipped inside. I did my usual routine, checked the window, set the motion sensor, locked everything. I tried to watch some TV to unwind, but my nerves were shot. Around 11 p.m., just as I was dozing off on the couch, I heard the beep of the motion sensor from my bedroom. Immediate adrenaline spike. I grabbed the kitchen knife, forced myself off the couch, and crept toward the bedroom. The sensor beeped again, a short, insistent warning that something was moving the window. Every hair on my body stood up. My mind raced. Had someone managed to remove the dowel, break the new lock, or pry the frame open? Heart pounding, I flicked on the bedroom light. The window was still closed, but the glass was rattling, like someone was shaking the frame. The motion sensor beeped a third time. I noticed my new lock screws were halfway undone, as if wrenched from the wood. I heard a muffled grunt from the other side of the glass. Something, or someone, was definitely there. I shouted, "I'm calling the cops!" As I lunged forward, pressing against the window, I felt a push from the other side, a force trying to open it. I jammed the dowel in harder, but the wood was bending. Whoever was there had serious strength. My blood ran cold. I could see a shape now, a silhouette pressed against the glass, wearing what looked like a hood. I couldn't make out any facial features, just a pale outline of a hand on the other side of the glass, leaving smudges on the pane as it tried to gain leverage. The tapping was replaced by a full-on banging now. It was absolutely horrifying to realize that if I faltered, that figure could break in and corner me in my own bedroom. In a surge of desperation, I took the butt of the kitchen knife and slammed it against the glass, hoping to scare them off. A guttural hiss, yes, hiss, emanated from the other side. Then, as abruptly as it began, the force relented. The shadowy figure withdrew. I heard scraping metal, presumably them climbing back down the fire escape. My chest heaved with panic. I stood there, panting, the motion sensor beeping over and over until I yanked out the batteries. Immediately, I called 911. When the cops arrived, they checked the alley, the fire escape, but found no sign of anyone. They told me it was probably an attempted break-in. They took some pictures of the damaged lock, but with no suspect in sight and no security cameras pointed at my window. They said there wasn't much they could do. They advised me to install better security measures and call them if it happened again. They left, and I was alone with the horrifying knowledge that someone or something wanted in, and they were determined enough to nearly rip the lock from the frame. That incident changed everything for me. I couldn't just brush it off as random anymore. I was convinced it was connected to the weirdness in the building and the old newspaper clipping about Harriet Cole. I decided to confront the landlord with the article. The next morning, I marched down to his office on the first floor, the clipping in hand. He paled when I showed him. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, as though the paper was radioactive. "In an online archive," I replied. "Why the hell didn't you warn me about the break-ins or anything?" He rubbed his temples. "That was a long time ago. It wasn't my building back then. That's old news. And no one's vanished here in at least." He stopped himself. "Look, it's not good business to dredge up old stories that can scare away tenants. Please understand, I didn't mean to put you in any danger. I thought it was just a rumor." "A rumor?" My voice rose. "Well, someone tried to break into my apartment last night. Are you telling me you had no idea any of this was possible?" He swallowed hard. "All I know is that occasionally, over the years, tenants have complained of noises, tapping on windows, but the police never found anything. This building is old. The locks are old. Vagrants sometimes climb the fire escapes. I've done my best to maintain security, but..." He trailed off, genuinely looking guilty and helpless. "Look, I can waive a month's rent if you keep quiet about this. Just don't break the lease. You can't imagine how difficult it is for me to fill these units already." I stared at him in disbelief. A free month's rent to ignore the fact someone almost got into my apartment? I nearly stormed out, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. My paycheck certainly wouldn't stretch to a fancy new building in the area. Reluctantly, I said I'd think about it. He nodded, relieved, and I walked away with even more dread in my gut. That day, instead of going straight home, I went to the Montgomery County Public Library. I dug deeper into archives, microfiche records, old newspaper reels. It took hours, and the sun had set by the time I found the relevant articles. It turns out, Harriet Cole wasn't the only person to vanish. In 1979, a man named Gerald Price disappeared in a nearly identical manner. The article described strange tapping on windows in the same building. A neighbor heard frantic banging one night, but by the time the cops arrived, Gerald Price was gone. No forced entry, no body. The case went cold. Even older mentions dated back to 1955, referencing the Tuckerman hauntings, though they were more speculative, describing local legends of shadowy figures that climb buildings, searching for an entrance. The details were fuzzy, written in that sensational style typical of mid-century tabloids. Still, the pattern was striking. Tapping, inexplicable vanishings, no resolution. I felt my blood run cold. How had I never heard of this before moving in? Probably because it's all old or obscure enough that most people dismissed it as urban legend or a fluke. Armed with this knowledge, I was both terrified and strangely empowered. At least now I knew I wasn't just losing my mind. There was a real, decades-long pattern. But what was it? A serial killer? Some cult? Something supernatural? My rational brain balked at the supernatural explanation, but the hiss I heard that night haunted me. People vanished without a trace, leaving no sign of forced entry or a body. How was that even possible? I started losing sleep. I'd stay up until 3 or 4 a.m., then catnap for an hour or two before work. I put wooden boards across the inside of my bedroom window, even hammered nails into the frame. My apartment turned into a fortress. I taped black trash bags over every window, except for a small slit in the living room so I could see outside. I rarely turned off my lights. Paranoia consumed me. I would jump at every noise in the hallway. I stopped trusting the elevator, preferring the stairs, because at least I could see if someone was following me. One night, I heard that unmistakable scraping in the alley again. I turned off all my lights and peeked through the slit in my living room window. The alley was cast in shadow, but I could make out a figure at the far end near some dumpsters, crouched low. It was wearing what looked like a ragged coat or cloak, head angled upwards toward my building's exterior. My heart seized. Could it see me? Was it waiting for me to look? Suddenly, it jerked its head in my direction. Even from 4 stories up, I could sense its eyes locking onto mine. I gasped, stumbling back from the window. I'm not sure if it was real or if the figure even saw me, but that moment froze me to my core. After a minute, I dared to look again. Nothing but the empty alley. The figure had vanished. 2 days later, as I was heading out for work early in the morning, roughly 6 a.m., I found a note slipped under my door. It was handwritten in shaky script. I know what's happening to you. Meet me in the basement storage room at midnight. Come alone. 4A. My heart pounded. 4A had to be the old man who'd introduced himself, maybe falsely, as Sam, or who Gladys called Mr. Bradley. Did he finally want to talk, or was it a trap? Every part of my survival instinct screamed not to go, but I had to. I needed answers, so I spent the entire day in a fog, half terrified, half desperate for midnight to come. After work, I went home, sat in my locked apartment, and stared at the clock until 11:50 p.m. Then, I crept out into the hallway. The building was deathly silent. Most tenants were asleep, and the flickering overhead lights cast a sickly glow. I took the elevator down to the basement, figuring if something attacked me, I'd at least have a chance to run back into the elevator. The basement corridor was narrow, with pipes running overhead and a musty smell of damp concrete. At the far end was the storage room, a padlocked door that tenants could rent space in. To my surprise, the padlock was hanging open. I stepped inside. The room was large, filled with rows of chain link fence partitions for each unit. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting swinging shadows. In the corner, I saw Mr. Bradley, tall, gaunt, wearing that thick coat. He gestured for me to come closer. I didn't mean to frighten you, he rasped, but you're in danger, real danger. His eyes darted around as if checking for eavesdroppers. I took a cautious step forward, every muscle tensed. What's going on in this building? I demanded. And why do people keep vanishing? He took a deep breath, voice shaking. You probably saw the old stories. Harriet Cole, Gerald Price, they weren't the first. This has been going on since the building was erected. Something, it's not human. It's here. He paused, swallowing hard. It can appear as a person or as a shadow. It lives in the dark spaces. It climbs walls. It taps on windows. Once it sets its sights on you, it doesn't stop until it gets inside. My rational brain rebelled. That's insane. You're talking about a monster or a demon? But then I remembered those eyes, that hiss, and I felt my skin crawl. Mr. Bradley gave a joyless laugh. I've seen it years ago. It took my wife. His voice trembled, tears forming. No one believed me, but I know what I saw. She woke me in the night, said something was at the window. When I got to the bedroom, the glass was shattered from the outside in, and she was gone. I only caught a glimpse of a shape slithering away over the sill. The police thought I killed her. I had no alibi, but they never found evidence. I eventually got off, but I lost everything. He reached into a pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. A woman smiling in front of a Christmas tree. That was her, Lily. She told me she heard scratching at the window 3 nights in a row. I told her it was the wind. His eyes brimmed with tears. When I moved back in here under a different name, Sam, as you called me, I did it to try and find a way to stop this thing, to understand it, but I'm no closer to answers. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What do I do? I asked, voice wavering. He shook his head. I don't know if it can be killed, but if it started tapping on your window, you need to leave. Now it fixates on certain apartments. You can't stay. The landlord's hush money is worthless if you end up like Harriet or Lily. I clenched my fists. But how can you be sure it's the same thing? He stared at me with haunted eyes. You've heard the tapping, haven't you? Seen the shape outside your window? It's the same pattern that took Lily, Harriet, and so many others. Please, for your own sake, run. My mind whirled. Why are you still here? I asked. Why not move? His lips twitched into a bitter smile. I've spent my whole life running, but it always finds me eventually. I suspect it's tethered to me somehow, or I'm tethered to it. I can't leave until I figure it out. He reached into another pocket and handed me a small slip of paper. This is a friend's address in Annapolis. She believes me. She'll help you find somewhere safe, or at least help you with money if you need it. Don't come back after tonight. I'm sorry. He turned to leave, but I grabbed his arm. Wait, if it's so unstoppable, how have you survived this long? He gently slipped from my grip. I hide. I set traps. I watch the patterns, but it's only a matter of time. He paused at the door. God help you, kid. He left me standing there, the single bulb swinging overhead. I heard his footsteps recede into the hallway, and I was alone. A chill coursed through me, a mixture of terror and desperate resolve. Could I really abandon my life, my job, everything, on the word of a man who might be unhinged? But the tapping, the break-in attempt, they were real, and the police couldn't help. After a few moments of stunned silence, I raced upstairs to my apartment. I wish I'd listened right away, but maybe part of me hoped I could confront this thing, record it, capture proof, something. So I decided to spend one last night in my apartment, not to sleep, but to stay awake, lights off, phone camera in hand, hoping to catch evidence of whatever was outside. If it tried to break in again, I'd record it, then run. That was my plan. I propped myself against the wall in my bedroom, the boarded window directly in front of me. I turned off all the lights in the rest of the apartment, so it would look from outside like I wasn't home. The only illumination came from a small lamp behind me. Midnight passed without incident. 1 a.m., nothing. 2 a.m., still nothing. I was starting to wonder if I'd scared it off for good or if Mr. Bradley's warnings were overblown. Then, around 2:45 a.m., the scraping began. Slow, drawn-out metal on metal coming from the fire escape. My spine tingled. Carefully, I raised my phone, set it to record, and pointed it at the window. My palms were sweaty, breath shallow. The scraping grew louder. Something was climbing up to my window. Then I heard a ragged whisper, too faint to make out words, but definitely a voice. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would burst. A single tap, then 2, then 3. It was back. My phone was trembling in my grip. For a moment, I thought about flipping on the flashlight, but I worried that might provoke it. Instead, I stayed still. Phone lens pointed at the boards covering the window. Crack! One of the boards snapped from outside pressure. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. The figure was trying to tear the boards off. The nails screeched as they were pried loose. In the faint glow of my lamp, I saw the board shift. A black hand with impossibly long fingers curled around the edge, prying it away. My phone camera caught it, a glistening stretch of pale skin under tattered cloth, or maybe something else. My blood ran cold. The voice outside hissed again. Then I heard a rattling sound at the frame, like it was testing the new lock. The motion sensor I'd reattached let out a faint beep, beep, beep. I saw the shape press its face against the gap. For a split second, my phone's camera captured something like a pale, distorted visage with no discernible features. Just a smooth curvature where eyes and mouth should be. I can't even describe how unnatural it looked. My body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, just watched in abject horror. Suddenly, the phone's camera caught a reflection of 2 pinpricks of light, or eyes, opening on that blank face. They flickered, emitting a faint luminescence. The thing let out a guttural croak. Another board cracked. The window lock popped. It was forcing its way in. Fear overcame my paralysis. I lunged for the door, phone clattering to the ground. I sprinted into the living room, nearly tripping over my coffee table. Behind me, I heard glass shatter. A horrendous scraping and thumping sound followed, like it was climbing over the sill. My mind screamed. I fumbled with the chain lock on my front door, blood pounding in my ears. It felt like hours, but I finally ripped the chain off and yanked the door open. I dashed out into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. I heard a shriek, something not of this world, emanate from within my apartment. The corridor light flickered. My legs wobbled, but I forced myself to run to the stairs. Behind me, I heard crashing, thudding, as if furniture was being tossed aside. I flew down the steps, stumbling, nearly twisting my ankle on the last flight. I burst into the lobby, breath ragged, tears streaming, just in time to see the night shift security guard, Randall, staring at me with wide eyes. He opened his mouth to say something, but I barreled past him to the exit. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I heard a shattering of glass from 4 stories up. Looking up, I saw a silhouette perched on the edge of my broken bedroom window, its limbs contorted, face pointed downward as if searching for me. My heart seized. Randall came running out, calling my name, but I just gasped, "Get away from the building!" We stumbled out onto the street. When I dared glance back at the window again, the silhouette was gone. I spent the rest of that night in a 24-hour diner a few blocks away, sipping burnt coffee, hands shaking uncontrollably. Around 5 a.m., I found a cheap motel and checked in, ignoring the clerk's suspicious look at my disheveled state. I sat on the bed, numb, until sunrise. I considered going back for my stuff, but I knew that wasn't an option. Even if that thing was gone, I couldn't risk running into it again. That morning, I went back briefly with 2 uniformed cops who Randall had called. The landlord was also there, pacing nervously. When we got up to my apartment, the window was smashed, boards torn off, the glass shards scattered all over the bedroom. My furniture was overturned, as if in a whirlwind, but there was no trace of the intruder, no footprints, no blood, just destruction. The police took some notes, scratched their heads, suggested it could have been a break-in by a deranged vagrant, though the vantage from the window made no sense for a typical break-in. They recommended I stay elsewhere until repairs could be made. The landlord shot me a panicked look, pleading silently for me not to expose him or the building's history. I said nothing to the cops about monsters or vanishings. I just told them I was moving out. That was that. I took only a duffel bag of clothes, my laptop, and my phone charger. I left everything else behind. Furniture, TV, my phone that had fallen in the bedroom. I couldn't bear to go in there to retrieve it. As far as I know, it's still lying smashed or lost in that ruined apartment. The landlord never called me to ask about the rest of my stuff, and I never tried to contact him again. The next day, I drove to Annapolis to find the friend of Mr. Bradley that he'd mentioned. She let me crash in her spare room for a couple of weeks, no questions asked, except for a quiet, knowing look when I tried to explain. She nodded, as if she already knew how real the danger was. I eventually scraped together enough money to relocate across the country. I left Maryland entirely, found a different job in a different state. I used part of my meager savings to legally change my name, convinced that if this thing was tracking me, I needed every layer of protection possible. Every night, I still dream of that silhouette at the window, and I jolt awake, covered in sweat. I can't sleep near windows anymore. In my new place, I live on the first floor with reinforced bars on every opening. Even so, I keep expecting that tapping to come back. It's been 4 months since that night, and I thought maybe I was safe. But last week, I found a slip of paper under my new door. It was blank, except for the shape of a black handprint. No text, no signature. Just a chilling reminder that I might never truly be out of its reach. I don't know if it's just my nightmares bleeding into reality, or if it's really found me again. I'm sharing this here because I need someone to tell me I'm not crazy. Or, if I am, let me know. But if anyone has experienced something similar, tapping, scraping, vanishings, please come forward. There's too much evidence spanning decades for it to be pure coincidence or mass hysteria. If you live in that building on Tuckerman Lane, get out. I don't care about your lease or your rent. Run. If you decide to stay, at least know the risk. I don't have a neat ending to give you. I wish I did. All I can say is I've done everything in my power to disappear, but that handprint found me. I'm still looking over my shoulder, double-checking every lock, every window, every open space. My coworkers think I'm paranoid, that I'm just a jumpy new hire. They joke about me not having any furniture near windows, about me wearing an absurd amount of protective charms around my neck. I'm typing this at 3:14 a.m. because I can't sleep again. My new city's nights are quieter, but that silence is worse in a way. Every little rustle outside makes me jerk awake, convinced it's that scraping sound come to claim me. I'm not sure how long I can keep going like this. Maybe I'll pack up and move again. Become a drifter, always one step ahead of the tapping. But how many times can you run before it catches up? I haven't heard from Mr. Bradley since. I'm scared for him, but a part of me wonders if he's the reason it hunts in that building, or if he's just another victim trapped in its web. The thought that it might be unstoppable, that it's older than any of us realize, gnaws at me. If Harriet Cole disappeared in 1996 and Gerald Price in 1979, how many more before that? How many more after? So that's it. That's my story. If I vanish after posting this, please, someone look up Tuckerman Lane in Bethesda. Keep digging. Tell the world what you find. Don't let them sweep it under the rug as another unsolved missing person case. And if you ever hear tapping on your window at night, do not, under any circumstances, open it. Turn on every light. Call for help. Move away. Do whatever you have to do. Because once it chooses you, it doesn't stop. Not until it's inside. I've been staring at this final paragraph for 20 minutes, not knowing how to end, because there is no clean ending. I wish I could say I have a plan, or that I discovered some secret to banishing it forever. I don't. I'm just a broken person, haunted by the memory of a shapeless face and a violent hiss in the dead of night. All I can do is warn you, don't ignore the scraping, don't dismiss the tapping. If you ever see a silhouette on your fire escape, run and don't look back. And if you see a black handprint under your door, well, maybe say a prayer, because I sure as hell don't know how to save you. I'll try to update if anything else happens. But if you never hear from me again, please remember this: you're not crazy, it's real, and God help us all. And wow, that was one hell of a story. If you're the person who sent this in, I'm really glad you're safe, because that was seriously chilling. I can't imagine going through something like that and still being able to talk about it. If you guys enjoyed this and want more true scary stories, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I've got more terrifying stories coming soon that you won't want to miss. And if you have a real-life horror story of your own, whether it's something paranormal, a strange encounter, or just something that still keeps you up at night, send it in. Your story might be featured in a future video. Thanks again for watching, and as always, stay safe out there. I'll see you in the next one.